Welcome to Caseback Watches. My name is Tim, and in this episode I'd like to speak about the service for your watch. And the title, Religion of Service, is not that serious, but I'm under the impression that there are some advices out there how to service your watch, when to service your watch, based more on faith than on proper information. And so I'd like to address those 5, we can call them service myths. And after that, we can see if we can find a better solution, a better way to make a decision, service or not service. Is a service necessary or is it not necessary? And after that, I'd like to speak briefly about trading, serviced and unserviced watches. So this is the program for today. Cannot afford or don't want to afford? This is the big question here. And imagine you have bought yourself a nice lawn for your backyard. This lawn you can roll. And then your neighbor comes by and says to you, nice lawn, very high quality product, very well done. But now you have to hire the lawnmower every 3 days for that type of lawn. And he's super pricey, but you have to hire him after 3 days. Every 3 days. And then you say, well, wait a second, this is slightly crazy because the lawn cannot grow. Maybe it can grow a millimeter or 2, but that's not substantial. Why I have to hire that guy every 3 days? And then your neighbor says, this is connected to the product. You have to do this. Otherwise, if you cannot afford that lawnmower every 3 days, you cannot afford the lawn. And this makes no sense, to be frank. This makes absolutely no sense. Or he says, you're just jealous. Then you're just jealous of the people who can afford the lawnmower every 3 days. Apparently jealousy is the number one argument on YouTube. You can say whatever you want, then you're just jealous. Or in other words, you're just jealous of the people who insist to use their brains before they throw the money out of the window or out on the lawn. Malfunctions, yes. At first glance, it's a very reasonable argument. We don't want to have malfunctions. But the problem is, if you wear, let's say, you wear a Rolex Datejust or a Rolex Milgauss or a Rolex, basic Rolex model, then at least in Europe, a service costs you 650 euros. And when you find a broken part in your watch, let's say a little wheel is broken, they have to replace it, then you have to pay 650. And if they find 2 broken wheels in it, then it will cost you 650. 650 is the price for a Rolex service. And so the argument here is, you have to spend now 650 euros to avoid the risk of a service in the next years, which will cost you 650. So paying 650 to avoid 650. This is not reasonable. There's no sense in it for Rolex. But of course, if you have a model, let's say Zenith El Primero, I'm deeply in love with Zenith El Primeros, but there's one downside. They charge you about 650 for the service and then for every part extra. And this, of course, then is a totally different calculation, and we will talk about that calculation in a minute. New old watch. Yes, I saw this on the forum, German watch forum, and there a guy bought an Omega Speedmaster Professional Automatic. Oh no, it was the Moon watch. It was the hand-winding model, and it was unworn, sealed with tags on it, so new. And then he figured out with a serial number that the year of production was in the past, I think 3 years. And then he went crazy and he thought, wow, horrible, now I have to pay for a service because after 3 years in a safe, a watch needs the service. And there were quite some people who second that. And I thought, what's the point here? And the basic thinking behind this is that the oil in the movement evaporates. And yes, oil can evaporate, this is totally correct, but not in 3 years. Plus, back then they used mineral oil, proper mineral oil for the movements. Nowadays they use synthetic oils, and synthetic oil needs way more than 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 years to evaporate. So it's not accurate. If you have a brand new watch which was for 3 years in a safe and runs properly, then relax, you're fine. You know what? I think it's not. I'm not a mechanic, correct me if I'm wrong, but the forces a car has to deal with, this is another leak. This is really another leak. A car has an engine, has combustion chambers, and there you have explosions in the combustion chambers and temperatures up to, let's say, 800 degrees Celsius. And everything rattles and shakes in the car, and the people like to kick their cars up to 200 kilometers per hour, at least in Germany. They love to do this, and they do it all day long. Okay, plus imagine you have a 20-year-old car. Then your 20-year-old car doesn't need a service every 5 years, it needs a service every year. I mean, everything will break after 20 years, but you can have a freshly serviced 20-year-old watch and it runs 10 years without an issue. Absolutely no problem for standard Swiss made watches. So I think the comparison is, yeah, it's simply, it's wrong. Okay, this is a crazy one, but I swear I saw this on a German style forum, and their collector explained to us that if you send your watch every 10 years to Rolex, then they will service the watch, and the service has a high quality. It's a really good service. The watch is like new. But when you have your Rolex 20 years without a service and you send it in, then they don't do the same service to that watch. The service to that watch will be a little more, will come with less quality. They don't change then every part which has to be changed. Yeah, that's the truth, he explained to us. A watch serviced every 10 years will receive a better service than a watch which is 20 years without a service. Imagine the Rolex employee, there's the Rolex on his desk, he disassembles everything, and then he says, oh, right, there are 3 wheels worn out, we have to replace them. But wait, this watch was 20 years without service. Okay, let's skip that. Let's replace that wheel, but not this. Is this reasonable? Is this really reasonable? Is this likely? I mean, a wheel, the cost for a wheel in a watch is a small percentage of the tiniest coin you can imagine. And replacing it is like this, out, in. And then he disassembles the watch again. So this is very, very, very unlikely. And this sounds really like a crazy religious belief. But correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you have other informations, but I don't believe this a second. Okay, what can we do? How can we decide if our watch needs a service, and how we can develop our own policy for servicing watches? And my advice is very simple and very, very down to earth, I think. Check your brand. Check your brand. Oh, I'm wearing a Rolex. Then go to the homepage and check the prices for the service, and you want to know if this price includes everything. Okay? And in case of Rolex, it includes everything. Then you have for your basic model, you can read there, okay, Europe 650, and then you can decide informed, is it worth it or not? And in this case, my opinion, I would decide not to service it. I would wear it, and I wear this piece until the first malfunction. That's the way it works for me. But different situation, let's say you have a Zenit El Primero. Totally different situation. Then you will find the price for the service on their website, plus every single part they have to replace. And this means Zenit, the manufacturer, Zenit has you by your... And nobody likes that, right? Nobody likes that. You cannot decide with a certainty. This is a problem. And in my opinion, this exactly is the reason why you can't pick up Zenit El Primeros so cheap. You can buy them on eBay sometimes for 1,600 euros. Which are roughly, I think, $1,800 for a watch which retails at 3,800. Okay, last topic for today. Trading watches, serviced or unserviced watches. First case, you are the buyer. You are the buyer, and of course it's very convenient to buy a freshly serviced watch, and you are willing to pay a little bit more. But my advice here is, if you are on the used market especially, ask for the bill. And often you will hear, no, I don't have any bill. My brother serviced the watch, he's a watchmaker, or my sister, or my uncle, or my friend, or Mickey Mouse, or who cares, but I don't have a bill for you, okay? And from my experience, I can say, if there is no bill, then there's no service. Or there is a little service. They call it the little service, which isn't real service. This is a service for, let's say, 100 euros or 100 US dollars, and it's cleaning and oiling the movement. That's all. And sometimes this is fine, this is enough, but it's not a proper service. So always ask for the bill if you want a serviced watch. I have no problem with unserviced watches because they are so cheap. They are so affordable. I mean, I love El Primeros. And you can buy them. Okay, 1600 is an extreme example. Most of the time you pay 2000. You pay your 2000 euros for a Primero. But it's a super great and advanced watch. This is a great price. Plus, if you pay with PayPal, then the seller has to deliver a proper watch to you. It has to run. And it will not break probably the day after you purchase, or the week, or the month. My experience is that you can wear those watches, let's say after you purchase 1 year or 2 years. And during those 2 years, you have time to spare some money for a proper service. So you spread the time a little bit to afford that watch. And a nice thing is as well that you can check the watch under the wrist for a longer period of time. And when you decide after 6 months, it's not for me, unfortunately it's not for me, I have to sell it again, then you can do this and you haven't spent so much money on the model. Okay, so this is the basic idea. Unserviced watch, you can pick it very, very cheap. You have time to spare for the service, and if you after 2 years decide that's my watch, then you buy the service and then you're fine, and then you have your luxury timepiece in outstanding condition. So every unserviced watch, in my opinion, is an opportunity. Okay, next case. You are the seller. You want to sell a piece, and of course everybody asks you, when was the watch last serviced? And then you say, well, 5 years ago, and I have the bill here, everything's right, I have every paper which is necessary. And then the buyer, of course, says, 5 years ago we serviced, this needs another service, this needs another service, and you have to lower your price. And this, of course, is what they want. They want you to lower the price. Okay, if you sell the watch to them, then he will not go instantly to the manufacturer for another service. He will wear the watch, and then he's really happy about the watch and the good price. So don't be overly tolerant if somebody claims that the watch after 5 years needs another service. Okay, they want a lower price, but maybe you have the idea that it's easier to sell your watch with a fresh service, and of course this is correct. And maybe you think then, okay, this watch is worth 2000 and the service costs 650, so then the value, the market price for this piece is 2,650 euros or US dollars. And unfortunately, that's wrong. I don't know why, but people don't want to pay you for the full service. They will pay you 2,300 and then you have some loss. And so in my opinion, it's not a good idea to buy a service only when you want to sell your watch. You will not get back your money, or at least the full amount of money. And by the way, this whole servicing thing, this topic is, I think, the major reason why watches are a bad investment. Imagine you have a stock, special type of stock, and you have the paper, the share, and then the terms and conditions says you have to send it in every 3 years to reprint the thing, and it will cost you every time 3% of the value. This would be a really, really lousy investment. Same thing with watches. That's the reason why watches are bad investments. Okay, that's all. That's all I know about servicing. If you have other informations or additions, please share them in the comments, then we can learn from you. And now let me thank you very much for your attention, and maybe until next time.